Hey Silver Chips, it's Grace and Aviva, and we're going to show you how to create a page from start to finish.
All right, so to get started at the beginning of the cycle, when you get your page assignments, you're going to go to the budget page on Trello. And we're going to pretend for this page that I was assigned, or Grace and I were assigned page D5. So I'm going to take a look right here. That is the buses story and the Blazers with Jobs. It's going to be a 5-column page. And I can see because buses comes before Blazers with Jobs, that I want buses to be the story on top. Or if I choose to do a vertical page, that I want buses to be on the left. So I'm going to get started. Just head on right on over to InDesign, where I'm going to make a new blank page. So I'll just hit create new right here. And then I want to be very, very sure I'm in unit Pika's width is 61 P6 and height is 96 P0. And then I'm going to click create. Then this is just something I like to do. I'm going to disable frame edges and guides just because they irritate me. All right, so then let's get started. I'm going to start just by putting out my 2 stories. I'm going to do this one in, I think, a horizontal format. These are the headlines we came up with, by the way. And I'm going to start just by having 2 headlines and 2 stories. And you can see I'm just clicking, moving my mouse and clicking again to bring them right out of CC Libraries. Super duper convenient.
And when Aviva gets a chance, she's going to go back to the budget to see what side this page is on. So D5 is a left page, so you need a left folio that is black and white. Color
What
pages.
does that mean? Sorry.
Which means you're going to go up to folios and you're going to hit the left black and white folio.
And a left folio basically means that we're going to want the page number to be on the left.
Yes,
and page numbers always go on the outside of the page.
Yes, great.
And so we're just going to be sure that we're changing that folio. Let me see, we're going to want to say features, D5, and it's not December 9th anymore. I think it's Jan 20. I believe we're going to print on the 25th, so I'm going to guess the date is the 27th, but I could be wrong. We'll have that firm date for you before we actually go to print, and we'll let you know. And then I'm just going to adjust all those lines. There should be 3 spaces, between features and Jan. And then that vertical line should be centered between them, and just make sure the amount of space there is the same as the amount of space here. And there's a whole nother video on using folios though, because as you might be able to guess, I am very, very fussy about it. All right, and I'm just going to save my page now to make sure I don't forget. I would save it to OneDrive, Silver Chips, let's say January. Oh, this actually, I'm going to save it in the December folder just because that's where the elements for this page were. And I'm going to save it in the D5 folder, and I'll save it as something like page D5.
And I also have a video on this as well, going into depth about how you want to use OneDrive, just so you can, go back and reference that.
Absolutely. All right. So were it early in the cycle, I might not have things like a final headline or text. By first drafts, you should, however, have at least a first draft of text. And so we're going to look on Trello for the most updated version of text, because we're really using a page that was, in fact, the D5 page from last cycle. Even if we put January 27th on the folio, I do have those final versions of text per page that I am going to pull up on Trello. Download bus drivers and in-person jobs. And then open this text. I don't have Word, so it's going to open in a really weird thing for me. But don't worry about that. So long as you can get and copy the text, it's all cool. And I am going to copy that text in. That is for the job story, which I know is the second story on this page. And then I'm going to go back and copy in the text from the student's working story. Oops, and I put the first one in the wrong place actually, so let me fix that really fast. Yeah, because we wanted buses on the top and I accidentally put it on the bottom. Oops.
But it's super easy to fix, and you'll see with grouping, it makes it a lot easier to move text around.
Absolutely, because these stories are just all grouped together. So now that I have the actual jobs text, not the text that I thought was jobs, but was really buses, I'm going to copy that into the bottom. And now I'm going to go look at the December cycle tracking sheet at English writing in order to get those headlines, which we come up with during story session oftentimes. If it's before story session, you can just get those headlines off of the document, with the text, or just use a filler headline temporarily. But because these were the headlines from last cycle, I already have them. Let me see, breaking out into new roles. And it looks like the story actually has a subhead. Oops, looks like the headline doesn't fit. Let's just extend that a bit and move it up, and then squish this a little bit to make space for our second deck, which is MCPS Transportation Team Keeps School in Session. And again, I'm going to need to extend that. Now I'm going to go pull the second headline. Let's see, and it is just a headline, no second deck, which is good because you generally don't want to have 2 second decks on a page. There are exceptions, and there are ways you can make it look good if necessary, but it tends to look better with just the one. Let me see. I could keep these left aligned, or I could center them. I personally think that with this format, just looking at how the page is shaping up, that centering is going to look better at the moment. What do you think, Gray?
I agree, but centering and left aligning things is really simple. Once you get elements, you can start playing around with what you like. But I think centering right now will look great.
And then they are centered, but you can see the text boxes aren't long enough, so I'm just going to extend them all the way across that page. One other thing to keep in mind with headlines is you generally want them to decrease in size going down a page, meaning that you want the headlines at the top to be bigger than the headlines at the bottom. The default font size from CC Libraries is about 40 point. I would not really make them smaller than that or smaller than about 37, 38. Let's rather increase the one at the top. And then that second deck looks a little bit small to me, so I'm going to increase that size too. The second deck and headline sizes are fairly flexible within about a 38 to 52 point font, I would say, for headlines. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can just play around with it until you think that it fits. A lot of design is just, visually looking at the page and seeing what you think would look best. And then just like a story, we can go in and give our edits to see if we agree.
Absolutely. And then I was just doing what I wanted to narrate while I was doing it. I saw that there was a red plus at the end of this text, which indicated to me that some of the text was being cut off. So I was just extending those text boxes down. But of course, we don't have elements in it quite yet, so it'll all get adjusted a bit later. But one thing I want to do before we get to elements is bylines. If I don't know who wrote these stories, I can go back to that cycle tracking sheet or PAG where story assignments are announced, and I can say, okay, Liz with Jobs is written by John and Buses is written by Sarah. Okay, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to CC Libraries. That was one writer each, so I'm going to want one of my one writer bylines as opposed to my two writer bylines. And we have all of our opinion pieces, whether those are in the opinions section or our culture opinions, sports opinions, COVID opinions, Askina opinions. All of them say an opinion, just to be super duper clear, but neither of these pieces are opinions, so I'm going to want that one writer byline without an opinion. I'm just going to drag it out and click one on the top story, one on the bottom story, and then I'm going to do a little formatting to make it look better. So I want the top of this byline to align with the top of the other 4 columns. So to do that, I'm going to click on the grouped text, and then I'm going to click once and then click again. So I have highlighted the first column, and I'm just going to drag that down a little bit to make space. And I'm going to put the byline right in there. And in order to make sure it's perfectly aligned, I'm going to check the Y value in properties. Take note that I'm selecting the group of the text in the line for the byline, not just one element, and definitely not inside the text. And I'm going to check the Y value of this column right here, 13 P1.2, and this one, 13 P1.2, so that's perfect. The space between the byline and the start of the first column looks a little bit long to me. I would say up about here is about ideal, but we don't have a strict measurement for that. And now I'm going to put in the real writer. That is not Sylvia Chipson, believe it or not. I believe this is Sarah McKenzie. And then her role, if I don't know, I could ask someone. I could see if it is on
I think it's on the full staff
the
contact
full
sheet,
staff
actually.
contact info sheet. Sorry, and so I know that she is a senior writer, not a staff writer, and so I'm just going to correct that. I'm going to go down. Sorry, did you want to say
Oh
something?
no,
Grace?
I was just saying that we also have a video on bylines. If you are ever designing a page and you don't really know exactly the correct way to format it, or if you have any questions and you don't want to watch this video all over again, there's a separate video for just bylines.
Absolutely. And it's important to get those titles right and definitely to get the names spelled right. So just be cognizant of that. And if you have a question about someone's name or about their title, just ask them rather than guessing. I'm going to do that exact same thing right here. You can see the spacing isn't perfect. Let's see, Y value in this, 56p9.6. I'm just going to copy that and paste it in on that byline. So they are lined up. Now, why is there that blank space there? That actually goes back to one of the common errors in text formatting. And so you can see that video actually about the common errors that crop up after you copy text in. This is a separate and pretty fast video that I recommend you all watch. But basically what it comes down to is that some people like to format their writing so there are blank lines between every paragraph. And sometimes that transfers into InDesign, and so you just have to go through and delete each one of them, which I'm going to demonstrate doing now. It's a little bit tedious. Writers, I might start thinking about trying to not format your text this way so that we don't have to do this when it's copied into InDesign. And then I'm just going to check if there are any blank lines at the bottom because they can throw off text formatting too. And now they're all gone. All right. And it looks like this text up here does not have that issue of having the lines between text, nor does it have the issue that also sometimes crops up of having super big tabs at the beginning of the paragraph that look like that, which you do not want, and you would just want to go click there and delete it. The next thing I would do is highlight the whole text. So click inside these text boxes because they're already linked. The text that is in one of these boxes is the same as the text just flows right over into the next. It has already been difficult to hire enough bus operators. You can see the text is just flowing from one to the next. If you have any questions about linking, you can see our separate video on that. But I'm basically going to click into that text box, highlight the whole thing, and then hit Command-Shift-T, or I think Control-Shift-T on a Windows computer. Take this one that's on top, and it looks like a little bit, oops, wrong one. The one on top that looks like a little right triangle. And just drag it out and make sure that says 1P0. And you can see that that has created these properly sized tabs in front of every paragraph. I'm going to do the same on this one, highlight the whole text, and I'm just going to show you guys a different method for doing the tabs. I talked a little bit about this in the text properties video, but if you go to after you've clicked inside the text box, highlighted the whole thing, and you go to the properties bar, either on the right or the top of your screen, scroll down a little bit under paragraph. You see this second thing right here. You can see that the more I click up, the bigger those indents are, and I want that just to say 1P0. And that's just another way to do tabs. They both work, they both do the same thing. Anything to add there, Grace?
I'm not sure if we make a video on tabs, but if we do, I think we have one planned. There's obviously going to be a video, so and probably in that video I'm going to go over different, common things that, pop up, because tabs can be a little tricky when you import text, but it's pretty simple once you get it to figure it out. Yeah.
And if you guys haven't figured it out by now, you kind of have additional videos on pretty much every skill in this one, yes, and then some.
Yeah.
So if you ever forget a skill, you just want to look up one specific thing, you can just go to some of our 3, 4, 5-minute videos. Faster, much shorter than this one's going to be. All right. So then the next thing I would think about are putting elements on my page. Elements
And
are things like graphics, art, and photo, or in another order, photo, art, graphic, tag. So I'm going to hop on over to the PAG spreadsheet. They may be combined next cycle with the cycle tracking spreadsheet. I'm not quite sure yet. But whatever spreadsheet your story assignments come out on, hopefully is where the PAG assignments should be as well. And I'm going to check the story. I see in-person work is art by Jennifer. And so I might just go to her on Slack and make sure that, especially with art, I had some idea of what the art might be shaped like and when it might come in. And I would do the same thing up here for the buses story. Let me see, buses is a photo. So I would just text that photographer or Slack them to make sure I knew kind of what they were thinking for the photo and when I might get it. And I would do that as soon as I got my page assignment.
yeah, communication and, jumping on, starting conversations about elements really is going to go a long way every cycle with every page. Nothing is worse than, turning in a page without without an element, final draft. So just start talking to your graphic and element makers and just loop us in and loop your, design team. I don't know exactly the relationship it's going to be, but just communicate about, things that are going on with that, just so everyone's on the same page.
Communicate with writers whose stories are on your page in case they're going to say things like, my first draft was double the length of what my final draft is going to be, so just be aware that the text I had, you can count on it being significantly shorter next draft. You want to communicate with artists, with photographers, with graphic makers, because the graphic makers are normally the writers, and oftentimes graphics kind of get forgotten about, so it's kind of good to remind people. You want to be communicating with me and Grace and Simran so that we know where your page is at. If you're having any issues, we're always happy to help out. Yeah, but communication is really, really key to making sure the paper gets out on time. All right, but we understand though that elements by the first draft of your page may not be in yet, depending. Or, art does element drafts, sometimes first drafts are in, sometimes they aren't. And so what we normally use are boxes kind of as stand-ins. So I might just draw a box. Here we go. That's my box. And I'm saying, you know what? That's my photo. And so I obviously don't want the text going through the photo. So I'm going to highlight those two columns. I clicked inside the grouping and then I held shift down and clicked on the other one. I'm just going to drag them down so they start below the photo. Please do it that way. There are less elegant ways you can prevent text from going through photos, but they really are less elegant and far more irritating to deal with. So I highly recommend just shortening those columns. And then this photo, it looks about the width of those two columns, and I probably want it to be exactly the width of those two columns. So I know that this column starts at X value 37p6, and I talk about this in the video about using X and Y and W and H values, but I'm just going to make it 37p6. And 24p0 is the right width, and if you want to kind of know how I figure things like that out, again, just go check out that video. I'm using the X, Y, width, and height values. And then because it's a photo, I know that I'm probably going to want a photo caption and that I absolutely need a photo credit. So for photo credit, I'm going to hop back over, pull this out of the CC libraries and click. With photo credits, they should be on the right side under a photo, and I want them one click below the photo, so that's not there. This is kind of right aligned, 0 clicks below the photo, and this is 1 click below the photo, so it's just that tiny amount of space. And I would put the photographer's name, I forget, you can say whatever, Robert Padmore, but depending on who it is, that's who we would, but depending on who it said on the tag sheet, that's who you would really put. And now I'm going to take out a caption and click there. Oops, looks like I have to shorten this columns a little bit again. And I'm going to want to shorten this so it's the exact right length and make sure that it starts as the same X value as that. column as well so that it's exactly under the photo. So I'm going to want this to be at 37 p6. I'm going to want it to be 24 picos wide. And I'm just going to remember that once I get that photo, I'm going to need to communicate with the photographer and artist to make sure I get a caption in a timely fashion. Oh, and then I can see that now because I added that photo, text is getting cut off. So I'm going to select the group with all that text and just drag it down. Not quite, not quite. And there we go. Oh, but it looks like that's not perfect because when dragging these down, it also elongates that space there and that space there. So there's kind of a little fussing that you do now, dragging that up and dragging this up. And oops, sorry, it looks like I actually still need to move it down even more like this. Perfect. And then I'll just extend these up a little bit so that space isn't quite so awkward. And it looks like you can see the spacing here is filling the full column, but that the spacing there is much too big compared to the other columns. So I'm just going to shorten them all like about a line, maybe 2 lines. There's a lot of fussing that goes on. Looks to me like there's not quite enough space between that and the caption. So I move that back down and it cuts off the text again. So I make the text a little bit longer. It's a process.
It is a process. And I mean, this
to me.
Yeah, I think that's good. It's gonna take some time to like figure out exactly how you like to do it. Another way that I like to make sure all my text is on the page is I like to press that little red plus sign and I like place it off the page and I make it the column 11p6. So I just see how much text I have. So as I move things, I can see it. That's just like a personal like preference thing I do.
Sorry, Grace, could you just clarify what you mean by that?
So I take
and I can demonstrate while you talk.
So when the text is cut off on the page.
So let's say it looks like that.
Exactly. I press the little plus sign that where the text extends, and I place it in the dark gray section. So it's not in a column.
The dark gray section.
Just anywhere. And then I make that 11p6, and then I can see
11p6 wide is what Grace is saying. So she
and
can,
I can
see essentially
how much space I need.
How much space is it? And what happened when we clicked the plus and then clicked over in the gray space is that it automatically made a column, a text box with that added text in it. And it just made it super wide, and we wanted to see what it was in the column width, which is 11p6 as we made that new text box.
Yeah.
And luckily, it automatically transfers the font and formatting options of this text. And so we can see that we have 5 lines right here. And so that we want this to be, since it's 5 columns, probably about 1 line longer. So let's just take a look. 2 lines. Okay, so we need a little more space, a little more space. Perfect.
There we go.
Because now there's no more text in this column. We can just delete it.
Yep.
These are all little tricks. You can also check back in the text. You can check the last line that fits on here, check where that is in the text, and say, oh, looks like I still have about a paragraph that I need to fit on the page. It all works.
Yep.
All right. So now with this one, it's art. Oh, I haven't fixed the spy line yet. Sorry. I know this is going to be, if I check back on PAG, let's see, in-person work. John, okay. So I'll just put him here. Sorry for calling you guys out, by the way. We're just using like a random page from last cycle. And he is a staff writer. All right. So this one's art, and I don't necessarily know what the art looks like yet at the kind of the first draft stage in the cycle, but let's say I talk to the artist, having seen who that was on PAG and slacked them. We figure out, okay, we're thinking some sort of vertical art showing like a person doing work or something. That makes a lot of sense for this article. So I might say, okay, why don't I just draw a rectangle, clicking on that rectangle tool, and then clicking and dragging out to make a rectangle. We'll say, what if our art is going to look roughly like that? We'll move it down to the bottom corner, and then we can play with the size to see what size art is going to fit on this page. Let's see. Now that's not really a great look. we probably will want this extending down all the way, right? And then just not overlapping with the art there. And oops, it looks like we have way too much space here, so maybe we'll make this actually a little bigger. And then what we can do in order to prevent it from overlapping with the photo there is hit Command Option W. I talk about this in my text wrapping art video. And then just we can go to the second option here, and that just wraps it around the box. And then we can increase this value if we want it to wrap a little farther from the box so that the text doesn't come quite so close, like that. But this is really just a way to make a page mock-up before any of those elements come in.
Yep.
And you can see the text is not perfectly aligned at the bottom, and were this any closer to being a final draft, I would definitely be fussing over how aligned it was. I had just hit Command 0 to zoom out, look at the full page. This is all final text, because I just copied it in, but maybe we're at first draft, I might have talked to the writers and figured out, oh, this is word count, and so I expect the text to be approximately that long. So it looks like I'm going to need to make the elements a little bigger, maybe add a window quote in order to take up some space on this page. So let's deal with first making those elements bigger and then adding a window quote. And then we can try pretending that it's a little later in the cycle and we now have those elements and we can try placing them. Am I missing anything there, Grace?
Nope, I think it sounds good.
All right, let's start with making this photo at the top a little bigger. I personally don't really like it when photos go halfway through a column. I prefer photos to span a whole number of columns. That was a math term, Grace. All right, so maybe I'm gonna want this to span 3 columns. I think 3066 is the right number there. And then I am going to want this to be, approximately the right number of the right dimensions. I can't just make it super skinny. Oops, I'm not. Oops. If I make it super skinny, then that's just not going to look good with what the photographer is likely to have taken. And you can see I just dragged off the caption and the photo credit to the side, and I will move them back in a minute. And you can play with photo placement. It totally doesn't have to be in the upper right corner. I think in the actual page that we ran last cycle, it was right in the middle. And then this column went up all the way. That's up to you. Play around, see what feels good and balanced to you on the page. And we're going to have another video soon about page composition, kind of thinking about where you want those elements to be once you have the technical skills to place them down.
Yeah.
I'm going to extend this text down, see about how far I need it to go. I'm going to put in right under. That looks 1 click under. And then I'm going to put this in and extend it all the way across. 36p6, just like this is across, and starting at X value 25, X value 25. Perfect. Let me see. I'm going to want these to move up a little bit. And I will fuss with where their exact heights are in a minute. Okay. I could try Grace's method again to see how much text is going to need to fit. I could just fiddle around until I see where the text fits. That's all up to me. Looks like there's some spring space on top that I think I'm going to move this up into. I'm using the arrows to move it up, and if I hold shift and then an arrow, it moves it instead of by just a click, by a full pika up. And then I'm just going to click on that text group again and move it down. Oh, and it looks like there is where it fits. Looks like that's a little far down for me. That looks pretty good. Not perfect. There's a little too much space there, I think. A little too much space here. But that's okay. For now, I'll fuss more with it once I have those elements in.
And when you're fussing with elements, you just want to make sure it complements whatever element you have. You don't want to skew the element, if it's art or photo. I mean, they worked hard on that, so you want to place them in the page and easier for most cases, it's easier for us to, you know, play around with the design rather than playing around with the photo or art.
Right, and so we don't want to just crop photos into super weird places or super weird shapes, because normally the photographers are going to have kind of thought a lot about the perspective and the framing of the photo. And if you take a photo that's shaped like this and you crop it so it's shaped like that, you know, all of a sudden that's not really going to match the photographer's vision. And so, well, a little cropping, of course, in order to make sure it fits like that versus that is acceptable. Try not to crop too much, at least not without talking to the photographer or one of our photo editors. And with art, like, try to make sure that art and photo alike are displayed. Don't shrink them really small, because we want to make sure that our photographer and artist's hard work is all being displayed. All right, so one thing I wanted to talk about down here was how you can see there's still a lot of space that's not being taken up. And one way that I like to take up space that I think looks good, I think adds to a page, and I think is really, really underrated, is a window quote. What is a window quote, Grace?
A window quote is a part, actually it's a quote either from the story or a quote from someone from the story that is placed inside of the design on the page, and it's kind of like a window into the story. It's pretty cool. We have them, we redesigned them for this year, and they're pretty cute, I think.
Window quotes are in CC Libraries. I'm going to click, move, and then click again. You can see that's just our lorem ipsum text. And format-wise, we're going to have a separate video on window quotes, just like everything else. This one we highly recommend you watch before you start using window quotes, because oftentimes there's just so much to screw up with a window quote.
Yeah.
It's amazing. But the basic idea of the formatting is that you will shorten a column, put them in the middle vertically on the left edge of that column. So I know that the X value of that column should be 37p6. I just have that memorized. You can check with the column if you don't. And then I'm going to copy the column, put it down here, extend it the rest of the way down. I'm going to click inside the text, delete it all. And then I'm just going to click back, click that arrow, and link up with that column on the bottom. And that just makes sure that the text is breaking around the window quote, but is still linking up. And I talk a little bit more about that in the linking text video, which I recommend you all watch if you still have questions. Let me see. Looks like we still have a lot of blank space left. Can move that up a little bit. I can probably move this whole story. I just highlighted it. Click and move my cursor over the whole thing. Like, yeah, literally click, hold, drag my cursor over the whole thing. And I'm just going to move it down a little bit using those arrow keys, or you can drag it, so long as one reason I prefer the up and down arrow keys to dragging is that it makes sure that the X values aren't changing, like that it's not getting accidentally displaced side to side.
Yeah.
And then I can try making this a little bit shorter, maybe. Oops, and it looks like then I'll just make that a little bit shorter, so there's a little more space. In the window quote, maybe I'll make this photo or art, sorry, a little bit taller. And you know, it's going to depend a lot on what the art is. I can probably assume I could say, well, you know what, I'm going to pick a longer window quote, and I'll just add a little bit of text here, blah, blah, blah. That's not how you spell, but ignore that.
Also, I think we're going to go over this in our window quote video, but break your columns when you're doing windows quote, please. It
Just
makes
like
it
how I showed with making that column shorter and then adding a new column at the bottom. Please do it that way. There are other ways you can do it that we're not going to talk about, because I personally think that they're very inefficient and sloppy ways of doing it, which involve wrapping text rather than just making a new second half of the column. Making that second half of the column really gives you a ton of control as to whether you want that column to end right there or right there. And so it's really, really by far the best way to do it. If you discover some other way, please don't use it.
And yeah, especially with elements that are like basically any element, actually, you want to have flexibility with how text wraps around it. You want to have flexibility with how So the best way to do that is by breaking columns and, maybe even doing some like freehand wrapping if necessary, not in window quotes, but other elements, of course.
Just to
Mainly,
clarify what that means, guys, in case you haven't seen any of our other videos, Grace is essentially saying that when you're inserting photos and window quotes, you should generally make those columns shorter, like we did here. And if necessary, adding another part of that column, another text box on top or below, and then linking that text. The exception is with art. I'm going to show you a little bit about linking art, and then you can see our separate video. But basically, there are a lot of ways to manually wrap text that give you some more control. And Grace was basically recommending that you look into that and learn how to do that because, again, being able to use InDesign is all about having fine control.
It's a game changer once you get control over, Pikas make so much, like one Pika can change a whole page, I swear. So
absolutely,
you just need to understand how text moves, and the way to do that is how to control over your elements.
Now, this is obviously still not perfect. I could spend a lot more time fussing. Were this a real page? Were this going to be the final element? I would probably make it a lot bigger. I would make this a little shorter. I might make my headlines a little bigger. I could consider adding a window quote or some such up here. But instead, I'm going to start by placing in my elements and then go from there and talk about how I might fill in the space with the element here. So I'm going to place my element. I can click on this square, and if I do, and if I place while I've clicked on this square, the element will automatically fill itself into that shape, into where I placed it. Or if I'm not clicking on anything, the element will just kind of pop up. I'm going to show you it where the element's just going to kind of pop up, but we have a separate video where you can learn more about placing elements. I'm going to go up to File and then hit Place. The element should be in that specific Pages folder. If it's not, you need to find wherever it's saved and drag it into that folder. So you can see I am in the D5 folder in the right cycle in OneDrive. I am going to find the photo. This is it. I'm going to hit Open, and then I'm just going to click and place. And you can see they start out ginormous.
Yes.
So what I like to do is I double click and I hit transform and scale it to about 20%. So I kind of have a more manageable thing. I'm going to delete this and put this here. When I hold Command Shift or Control Shift on a Windows, that ensures that I'm growing it proportionally, that I'm not cropping it in any weird ways, and that I'm not like squashing or stretching the photo. And then I want it to be exactly the right length, so that's 36p6. And you can see what I did right there is I moved the boundaries of the photo, kind of the edges where it gets cropped, past where the actual image of the photo extends. So I need to double click or click on this circle thing in the middle. I hope you can see how there's kind of this brown line that appears. Hold the corner of that, hold Shift so that I don't stretch or squash the image, and then drag so that that comes also all the way to the edge. And then when I click out and click back, I'm back on the blue lines. And you can see though that by changing, that where those blue lines are at, I'm cropping the image, not moving it. It's only when I've clicked in here and start doing things like, and start moving those brown lines, that you can see the cropped edges are still way out there, but I just really squashed it quite weirdly. That's not what I want. I want to keep it about like this, except it actually looks like it's a little too low down. It's now the right width and at the right X value to line up with this column and the rightmost edge, but it looks a little low on the page to me. Looks like we actually want it at 11p0.2. So I'm just going to do that, and that looks pretty well aligned to me. Looks like the photo caption got lost behind the picture. So really fast, I'm going to send this photo all the way to the back so that the photo credit pops up on top of it, and I'm just going to drag that down so that it is, yep, that one click below the photo. Does that look about right to you, Grace?
Yep, it looks good to me.
And then I'm going to have this here, make sure this is the right width, about that much below the photo, and then drag down my text columns. All right. Now that you can see that little red symbol saying, oops, you're cutting off your text. So I'm going to click out and then click on the full grouped text thing. Okay, looks like I dragged that a little far down. I'm going to go back up a little bit and then just drag these all, oops, up a little bit. You can see design is, some of it is kind of big picture work and some of it is the really fussy things over and over. It's really important to do both.
But it's so satisfying once you get it all done and like
It
finished.
is.
That's probably why I like design the best, because you get to like watch it, like the page come to life literally. So
and I'm making sure that I'm saving intermittently, so if something happens in design, I don't lose all my progress.
Exactly.
All right, I'm gonna go down now. One thing I forgot to mention when I was putting this window quote in is that as soon as I decide I want a window quote in this design, I would try to figure out approximately where in the text the window quote was going to be. I'll say, oh, this is about 4/5 of the way through. And I would message the writer, John, and say, hey, are you able to pick a nice window quote? That can be a quote either from the text, from what the author wrote, or it can be a quote from what one of the sources said. And I'm going to ask the writer to pick a quote, give them an approximate word count for how long I want the quote to be, and say, hey, would you be able to pick a quote from somewhere roughly in the last third of the story for me to put on the page? You generally want the window quote to correspond to the rough area of the story where that quote is from.
Yeah. We don't want window quotes to serve as spoilers for the story. So you want to have it kind of in the section where, like, you wouldn't have the last line in the second column. Like, you want to have it all correspond, so it flows with how the reader reads.
Right, so I would want this window quote to be maybe from right up here or right down there or something like that. All right, I'm now going to place this element. It's art. I'm going to start by deleting that box, then go back up to File, Place, and then click on this art. It's really awesome art, by the way. This art is also humongous, so I'm just going to right click, scale. It has saved my last scaling thing as 20%. I'm going to hit OK. That's a little small, but I can work with that. I'm going to move those cropping edges just so they're a little closer to the picture. That's a personal preference thing. It annoys me when they're too far out. And then I'm going to click on it, hold Command Shift in order to move both the cropping edges and the kind of the meat of the image itself so that it just all grows. If I don't hold that, then I'm just moving this cropping edge without adjusting the size of the picture at all, which is not what I want. I think I probably want my text to be a little bigger because I have that full column to fill. So we can say, okay, how about, sure, let's try it like this. I think I probably want this in the left bottom corner here. It makes sense to balance out that photo and just with the direction that the girl is facing.
I was about to say, pay attention to the art. Sometimes it's easy to imagine, you know, I want this art in this section of my page, and then once you get the draft or the final, it's a different direction. You know, you're gonna have to like adjust your design, which is totally cool. But like I said a little earlier, you know, just want to respect the art, respect the photo, and no matter what, the page will look great. So yeah,
absolutely. So now I want to text wrap this art. What is text wrapping? It's basically making it so that the text kind of comes down here and around the head and then fills in right here, but has space for the arm. So it's going around the art and not getting cut off by the art, but kind of adding a more dynamic look to the page. I have a full video on this showing a lot of different methods, so I'm going to go really, really fast right now. If you don't follow, that's totally okay. I really think that you ought to watch the video on text wrapping when you're practicing text wrapping, because this is not going to be enough. All right, so.
I was going to say, if you're only going to watch like a couple of videos, I would recommend watching the text wrapping video and the linking video. And it's probably
we'll provide you a list in the comments
Exactly.
math
But
thing, but the
the
text
text
wrapping is one of
wrapping
the
is
essential ones.
one of the essential ones. Yeah.
All right, so here I go. I'm going to hit Command Option W, and there are a couple other ways to do that. Again, see text wrapping video for more. I'm going to hit this third thing over with the circle, and then I'm going to go to Contour Options and hit Select Subject because InDesign is kind of awesomely magic. And then I'm going to increase the distance. You can see right now the text is right up against the edges of the image. That's not what I want. I generally like 1p0. Give it some good distance. And so you can see now the text is flowing around it. That's what I wanted. You can see it also automatically moved me to that second selection tool. I'm going to move back up to the first. Looks like I want it still a little bit bigger. So let's just Command Shift or Control Shift on Windows and drag. Now this situation here is not ideal. That's, I think, too little text to have right above an image. And so I'm probably going to have to make this a little bit taller. Okay, and then I'm going to look at this and say, this is kind of hard to read. In the midst of a globe, all right, that's not what we really want it to be saying. And so I'm going to move on over, and again, I talk much more about how to fix this in, Command Z in my text wrapping video, but I'm going to hit that direct selection tool second down, click on it so I get these little blue dots, and just move them and fuss with them until I can get this in a more readable situation, but one where it still looks like I'm wrapping that text. Like, I think that looks fairly readable right up there. But I would expect a lot of fussing from me and from your other design leads and EICs on making this readable.
Yeah, I think that although text wrapping is, it can be really easy just to, like just put it in and go, but they can't, I mean, we're a newspaper, you're supposed to be able to read the paper. So design is kind of just letting, it's a creative way of reading. So you want to be able to read the text. If you can't read the text, then we didn't do our job right. So playing
I
around.
certainly think design is important, and I'm all about telling you that design is really key to the paper, but so is that text.
Exactly.
We want to be sure that they're both
exactly
the paper are
exactly. And there's a lot. I mean, I think I spent hours and hours and hours text wrapping. I'm sure you have.
Oh God.
Yeah. So many hours text wrapping just to get the text readable. But like I said, it's so satisfying once you get it done, and once you can read it. And don't be afraid of adding, anchor points and playing around with it as long as it doesn't shift everything. But go to watch the video. So now I'm rambling about it.
So I think that sounded like a lot of jargon, and I went super fast.
Yeah.
That's okay. We have a much more in-depth video on how to do that. Please watch it. So looking at this page from a design standpoint, I don't really like the way this looks with so little text right up top. So I'm going to try moving this to the right. Again, using those arrow keys and just see what I get. Now, this is getting cut off here. Why? That's because that column is too short. So I'm just going to drag it down. And I personally think that looks better. Grace?
I agree as well. I think that looks, I mean, white space is great, but I just don't think that looked very good. So this looks a lot better.
So it's a lot of, even once you have that technical text wrapping down, again, shuffling stuff around. Now we do still have white space in the right column. I'm going to be honest, on the real page, there was a soapbox, which we talked about in another video, but that's another kind of element that took up more than a column of space. And so we are kind of compensating for space that we didn't have to compensate for on the real page when we were designing it this last cycle. But if I were in a situation where I needed to fill up some space, what are some good ways to do that, Grace?
Some ways to, fill up space. I think my go-to is always making the art bigger because, I mean, the artist did work really hard on getting this piece done. So depending on the art, I mean, this one's a little less forgiving, but some
Because it's so
pieces
vertical, you can't make it taller than the
you
text.
can't make it
really.
taller. So, but some pieces you can really, stretch out and it'll look great. And another thing you can do is just, squash everything down a little bit, which is probably my go-to.
All right, so let's try that. I think maybe we'll be able to squash it a bit here. Move that down, move the window quote down. Oops, that got a little unaligned. Be sure we're still at 37p6. Believe me, you'll have those numbers memorized in no time. Move that down, move that down. It's a little bit of an awkward space. One thing I might suggest in order to have a bit of balance in the design is actually putting a window quote in this top story up here. And so that kind of balances it out the way we have photo and then art. We can have a window quote and then a window quote. And we'll talk more about
composition
quotes, both composition in our composition video and window quotes in our window quote video. But one thing with window quotes is you can tell the text on this one is left aligned. But if I were to put another one, just Command C, Command V, and if I were to put one, say up here, I might right align the text so it's kind of mirrored, such that it looks like, sorry, one second, such that it looks like this. And then I'm just going to align those along the right edge using that really useful align tool when I have both of those, that line and the text box highlighted.
Yeah.
And then, oops, obviously this is pretty unreadable. So let me shorten
and
it.
then also another thing is, this is kind of just rule of thumb, unless some pages, are different, but you want to have one story above the fold, one story below the fold.
It's totally okay to be a little overlapping.
Exactly.
Fold,
that's
though.
what I'm saying. Like, that's
don't worry about that.
Don't worry about that. But if you add a window quote, this would make that story longer. So of course you have to move it down a little bit, which would take up some more space from the bottom story. So it's kind of all just finding balance, figuring out what looks best for the page. And, playing around with the elements. Some of the best pages, I think, have gone through multiple drafts of different, element placements, different window quotes, different additions.
Absolutely. It's about trying new things, right? Don't be static. Try new pages. I want to say something to something you said, Grace. What were you talking about?
I was talking about above and below the fold, here? About I don't actually remember. I mean,
right, just with above and below the fold, it is totally okay for one story to start above the fold and go a little bit below the fold. That's not something that readers really notice when they're reading the newspaper. It doesn't hinder readability and it doesn't make it look weird. The reason I wanted to make this story longer was because this story with the art and, well, not art, just this story without a soapbox is kind of shorter than this story, especially since this photo is really able to be enlarged more horizontally than this art is. So I wanted to make that story a little longer by including the window quote so that I can make this one a little shorter so that this column, that text would align at the bottom as well. So it's kind of all about, there's design, but it's also practicality. We get given text, and generally it's our job to make the text and the elements fit on the page together. So there are certain parameters that we just have to live with. And okay, one more thing. Something happens. Sometimes your font sizes just get changed really weirdly. And so I am just going to really fast change it back. I don't know why that happened. Sometimes when I roll my cursor in a weird way, it does it. Don't ask why. But that is the proper window quote font size. So you can always just go back and check from a different window quote or from CC Libraries, whatever. And let's see, I feel like I can now extend this down and these up. And then this down, oops, wrong way. And this as well. And once I've decided that I'm having that window quote, I'm going to immediately Slack message the writer to say that and ask. And if it is late on late night and your writer hasn't gotten back to you, you can ask an EIC to help you pick one. And that's totally okay too. All right, so this is looking pretty good fit-wise. Not perfect. You can see what's up there, right? What's up here? Let's just extend that all the way down. Let's extend that all the way down. Uh-oh, we can see that's no longer at x value 0. Did any of the other ones get screwed up? Yeah, actually, this should be at 12p6, not 12p3.6. Looks like they all did. This should be at 24p12, or equivalent to 25. These should be at 37p6, and this should be at 50. It's important just to check whenever it looks like anything's off to make sure that we got those values right. And then y value-wise is at 63p3.6, and I want that here too. So that looks pretty good to me. It's not a perfect page. If we just zoom out, Command 0, one thing that strikes me immediately is that I would probably want this window quote all the way in the 5th column to counterbalance this window quote in the 1st.
I agree. And also, something that, struck me was the little piece of text wrapping that didn't fully make it at the way bottom, but that's something that we can,
What
easily
Grace is
fix.
talking about is this.
That little or.
Absolutely, that's not something we want. And so we're just going to hit that direct selection tool, click on this until we get those little blue dots. Just move it so the or no longer fits there.
There we go. Perfect.
And one thing that I actually forgot, and this is something that's commonly forgotten, we don't want to do, is the artist credit.
I was going to say artist credit. And
so, okay, this one I believe was Jennifer. Sorry, by the way, the top photo was not Bobby. That's not his credit. I just didn't bother checking, but you should. You can see that it's the text wrapping is cutting it off in kind of an annoying way. So I would hit Command B, Control B on a Windows, and hit Ignore Text Wrap. All right, and then I would go here. I would kind of find the edge that I want to align it along. I think in this art, it makes sense to align it either on that edge of the cash register or on that one. I think I'm just going to do it on this longer one right here. So I'll tilt it so it's parallel with that line. And then I'll move it so it's kind of right up at that edge where I think it'll look good, and then try to make it so it looks about one click away from the art. And I think that's pretty good. Yeah, and then with this, I can just go back up. I should not set a bad example. Let's check whose photo credit this really was. Ari, okay. And so let's just correct that. These are things that we should always be checking, making sure that we have the right credits on everything. It's really embarrassing when we screw up, when we put the wrong bylines on stories, when we put the wrong names on photos and art. We just want to be really cognizant, be really, really sure. And if you don't know, instead of doing what I did and just filling in a random photographer, you should probably leave it as like Chipette Silverstein or something that's really obviously not the photographer.
Exactly.
And then ask. Okay, so the one other thing that I really, really want to talk about is alignment at the bottom. Text should be aligned all the way at the bottom of the page. But when I say that, I don't mean that the bottom of letters like T, H, E, and R should be at the bottom. I mean that the bottom of letters that go below, like P, Y, G, Q, etc., should be at the very bottom. And you can see right now that that P, that Y is getting cut off. So this column, I'm going to want to make about 1.5 clicks shorter. So I can make this about 32p7 instead of 32.8.4 tall. And you can see now the P and the Y are not really getting cut off. And I'm going to do that same thing with all of these. I moved it by 1.4, so let's just do that to all of them. And you can see actually the bottom of those G's are still getting a little cut off. I might want to do it a little more. Let's make that 6.5. Yeah, and that looks really good to me. I want to subtract another half of a click here. That's 7.7. Look at all this math I'm doing. And then right here as well. Sorry, that was 1.9, correct? That I've been subtracting. No, wait, 9.5, right? Looks like it. And then this
There
one
we
you don't
go,
have.
Aviva. We got
Look
it.
at
We
me, look at
still got
me.
it.
Yeah, and then this one looks like we're okay because it doesn't go all the way to the bottom because of the art. But that just ensures that the bottom of those letters don't get cropped off when we go to print. And then one other thing you might have been wondering about is the way that the text goes really all the way to the left. So it's exactly on the left edge and exactly on the right edge. When we go to print, the printer adds space on either side. And so we just align it all the way on the left and all the way on the right. All right, this page, I think, is a fairly good page. Obviously, it's not complete, like I was talking about moving around the window quotes, doing a little more experimentation there. But we have really our key elements. Again, we know that was a lot and that there are probably gonna be tons of skills in there that weren't fully fleshed out, you didn't quite get, and so that's why we're gonna have so many other videos focusing on all of our other skills. And again, we're always free if you want help.
Yeah. Also, it shouldn't take you, I mean, it might. I mean, we don't know. You know, play around, but I mean, we've been really playing around with this page a lot for this video. So I mean, it's gonna take you a long time.
Grace and I have spent so much time on InDesign in the past year and a half. And so, you know, it's a platform that we've become very familiar with. And it's just going to take a little bit of time for you to become familiar with it as well. But of course, the best way to learn it is practice.
Exactly. So take your time, have fun, explore InDesign, but try not to get overwhelmed, because I was overwhelmed, and it's very easy. Just there are only a couple real tools that you really need to know, and there's a video that we made about that. So all you really need is your CC libraries and your selection tool, and you'll pretty much be good to go to just start playing around.
Your communication.
And your communication. There you go, Viva. Okay. Anything
all right. Thank you all so much for watching. Please let us know if you have any questions.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.